upcoming 2021-2022 Charleston Symphony Orchestra season will be the last for musical director Ken Lam. I speak exclusively with Ken for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Ken Lam, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Quintin.
Yes, sir. You are an icon here in Charleston and beyond. Obviously, you're the music director for the Charleston Symphony Orchestra. You have a lot of titles: music director of the Illinois Symphony Orchestra, resident conductor at the Brevard Music Center in North Carolina. Also, you've been the artistic director for Hong Kong Voices. Who's Ken Lam these days?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I think I'm a musician, first and foremost, and hopefully a decent person. And that's what we do, wherever the titles, they just means that, you get opportunities to work with other people, which is really, really nice. And I do the same thing all the time. I study scores a lot, every day, whenever I have a waking moment, I'm probably doing some sort of studying or reading. And you just try and do your best when you're in front of musicians and try to bring out the essence of the music and, it's a cliche, but, to bring people together. And that's what we do.
What are you studying and what are you reading today?
Right. Well, I am studying a Beethoven symphony, and because we have a concert this weekend. And as well as a number of other pieces on that program specifically. I'm actually giving a talk tonight for Illinois. I mean, all these things are now on Zoom, so you can do things even though you don't you can't physically be there. So this one is on conducting, and so I'm doing a bit of preparation for that. And then I've got a few books back there. If I get a chance, I'll read a few more pages.
And how are you bringing people together with music these days, Ken?
Well, we are lucky in Charleston because we are actually continuing with performances and both live streaming and in person. So that way, that's our sort of more traditional way of doing it. In Illinois, it's a different state of different regulations, and so they are a little bit more restrictive. And so they haven't, in Illinois, we haven't had real big concerts. All the concerts we've been having are live streamed, but there are always pros and cons, right? Of course, it's not quite the live in-person experience, but your potential reach of these virtual programs, of these live stream concerts, is actually much bigger than your in-person concert. We had people from all parts of the country and other countries tuning in to watch those programs. And I've been, also giving talks, and because it's a community, the orchestra world, and both the musicians and the patrons, and we miss seeing each other. And so what we've been doing is, having coffees online and talking about music. I give a talk before every Masterworks here in Charleston to our patrons. And so it's called Wine with the Maestro, and or beverage of your choice with the maestro. And, so and I talk about music. I bring in some musicians to have a conversation with them. The audience can ask questions, and we actually go into quite sort of detail about the music. And so all of that, hopefully, will enhance their experience when they do listen to the live stream, or when they do come to the concert.
What are the pros and cons of music today?
Pros and cons of music today. Now, what do you mean by that?
What's different from the time that you started to right now?
Well, I mean, clearly I don't know. The obvious one is, of course, the pandemic has, made a lot of changes to the industry. Some good and some, a little bit, more sort of shocking. And like before the pandemic, for instance, our patrons who tend to be, older folks, a lot of them are not into this whole internet thing,
Right.
But because of the pandemic, they are all now tech savvy. Because they have to be in touch with their family and friends, and that's the only way to connect with people.
Right.
So that actually, I think, opens up a lot of new venues for us to reach people. For instance, I think, the Charleston Symphony, for instance, we've invested in technology to make the live streaming possible. Now that technology is not going to go away. When this is over, we go.
Right.
Yes, we do. I'm so looking forward to, having a full house at the Gilead Center. But there will always be patrons who they may have supported the symphony for a very long time, but maybe because of age or they didn't want to drive at night, they are no longer able to come to see us in person. But with the live streaming, they can continue to enjoy the programs. So I think there are there are opportunities that have come out of this pandemic. I think the orchestras are, they are forced to, really think about the future and what this actually means, because is this COVID going to go away? What we are told and all the information points, it's not really going to go away. It's going to be here. So how much is it? The vaccine helps and so on, but how would it affect the next 10 years in terms of the comfort level of people coming to concerts, for instance? So there are a lot of unknowns, and I think, every arts, not just orchestras, every arts organization have to really think about their model.
And what is your comfort level when it comes to music overall?
You mean making music with people? Well, look, I think the Charleston Symphony, I think they've done a incredible job. That we're partnering with MUSC,
right.
partnering with the Gilead Center,
right.
Because everyone, we're not going to let this thing beat us.
Right.
We are going to keep going, but we have to keep going in a safe way, and to make our patrons, musicians, and everyone feel comfortable. And right now, we're taking some compromise. I'm wearing a mask when I conduct. The string players are wearing a mask when they conduct. Everyone's socially distanced on
right.
stage, which is very challenging, by the way, because when you are so far away from you can't hear anyone else but yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not the natural way musicians play together. I mean, yes, we do watch the conductors sometimes, but most of the time we actually listen to each other and play chamber music.
Yes.
And nowadays, if you look at if you've been to our virtual concert hall, the wind and brass players are so far back in the hall that when they play, they hear the strings about half a beat behind when they're playing. Because if you think about it, it's not just the stage, you've got the whole hall.
Right.
The sound goes to the back of the hall, comes back. That's when they hear it. So brass players would tell you that they're used to it, because that's where the brass always are, way back. So they actually play a little bit ahead of time in order for the ensemble to work. Now wind players have to do that now. And the string players have a different kind of challenge, because they have to play together as a section.
Right.
And what the way they do it is that they try to listen to the concertmaster, and play with him, and they can't hear because everyone is so far away. So in order to try and hear the front, they are all playing a little bit cautiously, because if they play out like this,
right.
all they can hear is themselves. So that's another issue. And of course, when I'm the conducting, 80% conducting is the face.
Right.
It's actually not this.
Right.
Maybe if you're conducting students, maybe they need this 1, 2, 3, but these are, phenomenal musicians. They don't need the 1, 2, 3s,
Right.
but what they do need is a vision of the music. And, yes, you can try and do it with the hands, but most of it is done on the face. What is the music expressing? And half my face is covered up. So it's, I'm using this thing called clear mask. So you
Right.
can sort of, but it's not the same.
Right.
So, they are not able to play the way they want. I'm not able to play the conduct the way I want. So we have a lot of challenges, but what I was just so impressed by is just the musicians themselves. Everyone is still wanting to sound their best, despite having all these challenges. So, the performances, I was listening to our Brahms for last week. It's actually quite good. And, it's so I'm actually fairly happy about how that side of things have gone. We're making the best situation out of a not so great situation.
And what exactly will be your vision for music 5-10 years from now?
I don't think classical music's going to go away.
Right.
Because people say, oh, classical music's dying, young people not coming to. If you look at the music criticism or music like 100 years ago, they're saying exactly the same thing. So because it's art.
Yes.
Art, it's the human condition to look for something beautiful. We all have that, whether it's music or paintings or architecture,
Right.
or in many ways philosophy and religion. What are we all trying to do? We're trying to be in touch with something beautiful. And beyond beauty, as the saying goes, lies truth. And that is what we are all trying to do. And musicians do that through our medium, which is music. And when we do it right, it touches people. So I don't think music's going to go away. Now, we have to be careful, though, because music education is not quite what it was 100 years ago. And nowadays, we see. I mean, I'll give you a good example. In Illinois, in Springfield, the public school system have taken away the string music program for decades now. So, I mean, we're lucky in Charleston. We still have a fairly good public music education, but it's not the same. But the trend is that those programs are being cut. Now, if one has played in a band or sung in a choir or played when they were young, now, and we all get it, when you're in your 20s, 30s, even 40s, you're too busy.
Yes.
Right? Because with your career, raising a family, or what have you. But if you've had that experience, when you come out of the other side and say, okay, well, now I have a little bit of time. Oh, I remember playing the Dvorak New World Symphony when I was, 14 years old. I used to love that experience. Now, why don't I go to the symphony? So I think that is the key. And that's why since I've gotten here, we have really expanded our education program. We now have a youth orchestra. The youth orchestra has just grown exponentially. And I think that is a key thing that like professional orchestras have to lead by example and advocate all the time. It's for music education to be accessible to all, and hopefully, we can persuade the powers that be to support these initiatives, because I think all the research shows that a young person with some musical training tends to do better in pretty much everything else. And that's that's actually not difficult to explain, right? Because if you do a test in school and you score 90%, you probably get an A, right? Right. Can you imagine a professional orchestra playing 90% of the notes right? Mm. You can't. I mean, it would sound horrible if you play 90% of the notes right. So musicians that we are trained to be 100% all the time. And and that's the real benefit for young people. If they study music, they also are trained to be, like wanting to be 100% all the time. And that mentality will go to everything else that they do. And that's why people with musical backgrounds tend to do better, I think, at everything else.
Musically, how do you lead by example?
Well, that's actually a very good question. And leading by example is pretty much not all we can do, but it's a very big part of what we can do. I try to be extremely prepared. Because when you stand up there on the podium, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know. Well, the ideal is that you should know more than the orchestra does, and that's not easy because I don't know how to play the bassoon. I don't know how to play the timpani, but musically, I have to know everything in the score. I have to know everything about the history of the piece, the story of the piece, and I have to have a very clear vision of what is it that this piece is about and what I want from the sound. And the orchestras are very sensitive people. The moment they see that you don't know, you're faking, they will lose all respect for you.
Wow. And this might be a redundant question, but what is your vision for the Charleston Symphony Orchestra going forward?
It's like there are many different parts of this, right? There's the artistic part, and there's, in the eyes of many, and equally important, but if not even more important, is what's the role of the symphony in the community. So from the very sort of more narrow part, the artistic part, of course, is to continue to play better and continue to improve. And we play at a very high level, but and everybody knows this in the orchestra, there are things that we can do better. And so the way to do it for a music director is, to pinpoint these things, to keep working on them, to pick repertoire that actually trains up the orchestra, and to do it in such a way that is not alienating to the musicians. To do it in such a way that includes everyone, that do it in ways so that everyone feels that they want to contribute. And that's the mark of a good leader. Now, in the other big role is to, the role of the symphony in the community. And I think, I already talked about a big part, which is music education.
Right.
I think that's really important. And then, the other thing is, you look at a city like Charleston, you want to bring people together. And that is, like in a concert, that's literally what we're doing together, right? We actually like making people sit in the same room and have an experience together. And if we do it right, at the end of that concert, we have something else in common, even though maybe, even me and you, we just met for the first time today. If we went out after this Zoom, we have a connection.
Right.
If I invited you to one of our concerts and we chat afterwards or have a meal, we have another connection. So I think this bringing people together, and I'm talking about not just the people who subscribe to the Charleston Symphony. Yes, we love those people, because they love music and so on. But there's so many people in this community. And I dare say, if you talk to them, I'm sure the vast majority have some sort of musical preferences. I'm sure they listen to some sort of music. And so it's a question of, yes, this orchestra is a classical orchestra. So we'll always be playing Tchaikovsky and Beethoven and so on. But we also have a responsibility to look in the community and work with people here. And, for instance, we work with, our friends, Charlton Singleton and
Right.
the likes, we collaborate a lot because that is Charleston, and so there is a way for us to create new collaborations. For instance, of course, we play with Charlton and this group, but we also collaborated with the painter Mary White
Right.
a couple of years ago with her exhibition, and we had her paintings projected on the screen and had music accompanied, and that brings in another crowd, and brings our patrons to see the fine arts. And so I think there's a lot of that a lot of opportunities that we have to keep exploring and keep growing in that direction. Because otherwise, we're going to become irrelevant. And I think that's the most important thing, is to look to serve the community and be relevant in the community.
How do you serve the community and be relevant in the community with the latest news that we just heard?
Which news do you mean?
Obviously, you're not going to be with this is your last season.
The restructuring.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible, because look, I think not one person is the music director is a person, yes, it's an important person in the organization.
Yes.
But but we're talking about an organization that have 23 core musicians. We're talking about an organization that has a very dedicated administration team. We're talking about an organization with a very dedicated board, and a very dedicated symphony league, and a very dedicated subscribers and patrons. So I think the pandemic has posed a lot of challenges, not just for the Charleston Symphony, but for orchestras and arts organizations across the country and the world. I mean, I don't know whether you follow the sort of orchestra scene, but how many orchestras have ended up not having a season, having to furlough their musicians, having to, cut like this and that, and so we, to think that Charleston is somehow immune to that, we just can't. No, of course not, because we've had to change our model as well. Now that we can't seat everyone at the Gilead Center because of the social distance, and a lot of patients are not quite ready to come back.
Right.
So, and that's what you read in the news. There's a revenue shortfall, and so on and so forth. All of that has to be dealt with, and I actually think. So how do you deal with it? Part of it is, okay, we're going to subsume some of the administrative function into the Gilead Center. That you've read also in the press release.
Right.
Now that will generate some savings, some economies of scale.
Right.
But you have to think in, with everything that you do, because we haven't had an office, a symphony office, for some time now, because we gave that up to save money. And so, it is not as if, all these decisions just came at a whim. These are very, very tough decisions that a responsible board has to make. And if you, just in terms of the music director position, my contract is coming to the end at the end of next season. It's my second contract. I've had a pretty good tenure here. It would be 8 seasons, and it's not abnormal to have that sort of yes. I mean, David Starr, when he was here
right.
for 20 plus years, and
right.
We've heard other orchestras. Music director there for 40 years.
Right.
That model has changed. That model has certainly changed. You don't see that kind of. Now, there are pros and cons also there, but I think it is an opportunity for the orchestra to really think about. I think number one is survival. I think if the orchestra can't survive, we can't even have the conversation, And I think that this decision to change the structure. I mean, to be honest with you, I'll probably have done the same thing. I probably have done the same thing, because what else can you do? Do you cut into the salaries of the musicians? I mean, these musicians are tenured, so they are here. You know, they are living in Charleston, and Charleston, as you know, is not getting cheaper.
Right.
Charleston is a very expensive city to live in. So, you know, like, so what do? Do you ask everyone in the musicians and let's take a 40% pay cut? You know, so I think the board has a lot of things to consider, and I actually, you know, I would have done the same thing. So, I mean, is it not a shame? Yes, you know, I love the musicians here. I think we are doing a really good thing, you know, as I think most people recognize that we've been playing, the orchestra's playing well,
Yes.
and we are, you know, getting better all the time. And so from that point of view, of course, it is a shame. But, you know,
Yes, sir.
under the circumstances, you know, I think courageous steps, and this has not come just at the expense of the music director position. You know, you've got to, like, you know, there's the administration part as well. I mean, you've got to look at the whole thing, and so I think what the board is doing everything they can to ensure that the orchestra survives and is viable.
And what other steps should they take to make certain that the orchestra obviously survives and is viable?
Well, I think they've taken so far. They've taken you know, fairly drastic steps. You know, this is a reorganization. I think they need to just take a look at they need to take a look at what happens after the pandemic. Are the audience numbers going to go back to where it was and increasing, or is it going to be, it's the decrease, sort of quasi-permanent one? Like, what about the stock market? You know, we're actually very fortunate. You know, the market is all-time high right now. And so during the pandemic, we're actually very lucky that the donations have kept coming in. But, you know, with economic cycles, who knows when the next, you know, touch wood, we don't have it for a long time, but like when the next downturn comes. Because if you remember, in some ways, history is repeating itself. You know, the Charleston Symphony went through a very rough financial patch during the last financial downturn.
Right.
And that's the last time when they restructured. Remember, that was painful,
Right.
you know.
Right.
When, you know, but it's sort of the same. I wouldn't say it's not the same, but it's a circumstance. Those are recent enough memories,
Right.
that I think the board are very, very careful to try and avoid.
And what has been those audience numbers since COVID?
Well, since COVID, what we've done is that before COVID hit, we already released our subscriptions for this season.
Right.
And subscription money has come in. So just with the subscribers, you know, the capacity hall has greatly reduced because of the social distancing. So basically, instead of 2 concerts, we're now doing 3 concerts this season just to serve the subscribers. We're not really selling that many single tickets. We certainly have not marketed them. The subscribers, many of them, since they have had the vaccine
Right.
shot, have started to come back in person now. But there are subscribers who are saying, okay, well, at our age, we're going to stay home for now,
Right.
but we'll be back when we think it's really safe to do so. So, so this year's model is very, very different. So normally we would be looking at, okay, well, let's really market the concert so get a lot of single ticket buyers. We have not done that this year, and that's why we have that shortfall. And so it's a weird year. So and as you know, 2 weeks from now, it could be a completely different story. That was certainly the case last year.
Right.
When we canceled the first concert, we thought that maybe by May it will be fine, you know? And then, oh, surely by September it will be fine.
Right.
And yep, and then we're still not quite there yet.
And
Yeah.
And you talk about obviously those musicians throughout this particular interview. Which one of those musicians at the orchestra resembles you?
You mean?
Musician wise, yes, sir.
I think all of them do, because by musicians we are kind of perfectionists for the reason I just talked about. If we can't really play 90% of the notes right, so we have to get 100% of them. So I think all of the musicians have that fire in them, and it's frustrating because I feel the frustration too, because like, oh my goodness, now I have to be a traffic cop to help them come in and this, but they are also frustrated. But we just, so the key really for this year is just tell everyone, don't worry, it's fine to be frustrated because, of the services, but let's just keep our sense of humor and keep going. And that's what we've been doing.
Wow, that's just amazing. And over your 8 years, well, obviously your 8 seasons at the Charleston Symphony Orchestra, which season would you describe as your best?
Oh gosh, I think that's a very good question. I mean, there are certainly highlights. Of course, that very first concert with Yo-Yo Ma at the Gilead opening again, that was very special. But I think if you're really talking about which one is my best, I'd say hopefully I myself also have grown over these 8 years. And I'd like to think that I'm at my best now, even with the pandemic. And I like to think the orchestra is also at their best now, even with the pandemic, but with all the work that we've gone through. Because the key of a music director is that, the musicians can see the same pair of hands all the time. And we've worked out what needs to be worked on, and we are going at those issues every day. And so we're not starting from here. Every time we work, we get into a sort of consensus about where we need to be. So nowadays, when I go to the orchestra, I bet you anything, I think I know what Ken's going to say next. And so I try to surprise them by finding new things to pick on. And so that way, we're building on what we've achieved so far. And that's the real importance of this relationship.
When I was doing my research on you just recently, a couple of days ago, I didn't notice, but apparently, I don't know if you still are, but you were at some point a lawyer. And
yeah, that's right. That's my first career. Wow. I was a lawyer until I was in my mid-30s.
Wow.
That's right.
If you were to look at your career as a lawyer right now, what would be your best case to put forth to the public and say, hey, this is Ken Lam?
If I were to look at my career as I have to understand that question a little bit more.
Yeah. If you were to look at your career from a lawyer's perspective, how would you put that best case forth to the public?
I see. Well, I think in any profession or in general as a person, you grow, hopefully. I always say this, the most difficult thing for anyone, musician or otherwise, is to recognize your own weaknesses. Because if we recognize our weaknesses, we wouldn't be weak at those things because we would have worked on them.
Sure.
And it's because it's very hard for us to actually be very honest to ourselves.
Yes.
To recognize those things that we need to work on. And that's still the case. So I have to remind myself every single day to be very honest, seek the right feedback, because there are different, because as a music director, you don't get that feedback very often. Because a lot of musicians, they see you as, he's the boss,
Right.
Now, I don't see it that way. I hope our musicians don't feel it that way. But nevertheless, there is this perception that the conductor, oh, you have to do, but you want to be very honest with yourself. You want to seek out people who will give you honest feedback that you can trust. Now, there are people who will give feedback whether you want them or not.
Right.
There are people who give feedback that are not valuable either.
Right. Yes.
Right? So you got to be very careful about, who. So I guess when you ask the question, what's my best case forward? I think I'm someone who do music for the right reasons. I don't do it for my own self-glorification. I don't do it to advance my own career. I don't do it even, to get adulation from audience. I do it because I love the music and I love working with musicians. And I think together we can, have you, do you play golf?
No, I just run.
I often use the golf analogy.
Okay.
When you hit the ball really flush,
Right.
you don't even feel the ball.
Yeah.
Right? It just goes right in the middle of the club and just, and once you have had that feeling, you're hooked because you want to get that feeling back. And that's why, golfers get so frustrated because
Yes.
they can never get that feeling back.
Right.
Music is the same thing. When every tone is in the right place, when the orchestra, when all of us are all thinking about the same thing, the audience, whether you know music or not, somehow you're transported elsewhere. You had that feeling before?
Yes.
You're in a performance, suddenly, oh my God, where was I? I was just like somewhere else. But as soon as somebody plays a wrong note or plays something, the ensemble is a little out, you're back in the room.
Yeah.
Right? And is that transformative, almost transcendent experience that I'm after? Because I think that experience is life-changing.
How do you? Yeah, exactly right. And how do you prepare for your last season? I know that's a simplistic question, softball question, but how do you prepare for that?
No different than as I prepare for any concert. Yeah, I tend to live my life like that. Everything. If you ask me what is the greatest piece of classical music, it's the one I'm preparing for this weekend. You have to live your life like that. Otherwise, for me, it's not worth it. You can't. For me, it's always the journey and not the destination. It's because who knows where the destination is going to be.
Right.
You have to treat every day as if it were the last. And I think that's so. It's actually a very simple answer to your question. This next season will be hopefully a really phenomenal season, and will give our community some excellent concerts. And hopefully I'll continue to grow as a musician and give them my best all the time.
All the time. What is your closing argument on your musical journey?
Gosh. I think I like to think of myself and the some. It's sort of almost how you hope to be defined as. I hope to be remembered as somebody who has a lot of integrity and honesty, because I think without these two elements, and enthusiasm also, without these, the art that comes out of someone without integrity, it's not worth listening to. It's like, because as a conductor, when you stand in front of an orchestra, you're almost like, for want of a better word, you're naked. You're up there, you're pouring out your soul.
Right.
And I tell you, musicians are the most sensitive people. If there's a hint of dishonesty in what you do. It comes through. And, I was an assistant conductor for the Cincinnati Symphony for 3 seasons, and I worked with many guest conductors. What's amazing is the same orchestra, right? Every week, but sometimes different conductors, and we have a music director too. But they have, because, they play 40 weeks a year, so they have to have some guest conductors. And every guest conductor, within 5 minutes, the sound of the orchestra is completely different.
Wow.
So they watch the conductor, and basically what you're hearing is the conductor. Like, now, there are some conductors who just, the orchestra would choose to ignore. There are those too. But the good conductors, they all have their own personality, their own mix of personality, the mix of their own sound that the orchestra will bring out. A good orchestra will bring out right away. And so I hope to be, remembered as somebody who did his best all the time, and somebody with good musical integrity.
The Honorable Ken Lam, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to the award-winning Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Likewise.